Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Complex Like Wine, the podcast where we talk about complicated things and improve over time, just like wine does. Here with another episode, another guest. This week we have Ray, and I'm really excited. He's tuning in all the way from the East Coast. And how are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to be able to do some guest spots on someone else's podcast. It's a lot less work on my end, but still an enjoyable time. So,
Right, so before we kind of get into everything, Ray also has his own podcast, and he's also another wine lover. So we have our wine glasses with us. So before I ask Ray about his, okay, Ray, what are you drinking today?
it is a Domaine Tempier Bandol. So the grape is Mourvedre. It's like 70, 75%, but it's a red wine. It's from Spain. You can find it, you can actually find it in grocery stores. I think it's like maybe like 70 bucks a bottle, but really tasty, kind of goes well with everything. So, it's light enough to drink in the summer, but still red wine if you want to go that route. So I'm a big fan.
Very cool. I have a Pinot Noir. I've never had this bottle before. I know it's from France. I should have brought the bottle with me. I always forget to just show the bottle. But yeah, I haven't had it before, so I'm not sure how it tastes, but cheers. Okay, I enjoy mine. Yeah, that's pretty good. Are you typically more of a red wine person, or do you like whites more?
I mean, I really like champagne.
Oh, okay.
That I can just like drink all the time. But I mean, yeah, as you kind of like, I'm going through some studying for wine exams. So you start trying more and more stuff, or you learn about more stuff. And then you kind of just spread out and spider out from like, oh, well, I don't normally drink this. Let me see if I can find it. Like, what's this taste like kind of thing. So, I mean, like, I've tried, wine from like Romania and stuff like that. And you're like, whoa, this is like, you would never think really like, France, Italy are kind of your big hitters, Napa Valley, obviously, but then you get into some like even the Hungarian wine, like it's mostly sweet and dessert wine, but you can find some that isn't. And it's like, this is actually pretty good. Like, so it's been cool to try a bunch of stuff. I'd say probably champagne, and then usually like big fan of Riesling, I'd say too,
Hmm.
and then red probably, yeah, Pinots. Big fan. Still like cabs. I know everybody kind of is like off on that right now that they're too heavy and stuff, but I still enjoy like a nice, just big, bold one. Every once in a while, I had one like a couple weeks ago, and it was the longest time since I had one before that, and I was like, oh yeah, this is still cool. This is still good.
Yeah. Typically, I go for the big bold reds. So I love my cabs and then Syrahs. That's typically what I go for. Whites, not too much, but when I worked at the winery, I got exposed more to whites. So I found like certain ones I really love, like Albarinos, I think are my favorites now. Or, good Sauvignon Blanc during the summer. But yeah, the reds for sure, like my home base. Champagne every once in a while. We'll indulge, but not too often.
Yeah, I think that one that I just still don't really like, still for whatever reason, it's Chardonnay. I know it's one of the main grapes and stuff. Like I like it in Champagne, but just like a Chardonnay by itself, like I'm just for whatever reason, I'm just not there to really, I guess, appreciate it or really enjoy it. It's just kind of one of those things. It's like, it's fine, but it's never going to be my go-to. Like, so it's just kind of, yeah, one of those. I know it's, super popular. It's planted all over the place, but yeah, it's just not there for me yet.
I'm very particular with those as well. If it's in a stainless steel, then I'm more on board. But I think when it gets way too oaky buttery, sometimes it's a little funky. I'm like, I'm a little picky with the Chardonnays, but I know a lot of people love Chardonnay. And it's like one of the more popular ones. But yeah,
Yeah. Have you had any like orange wine?
orange wine.
Like just getting really out there? Because that stuff's
Yeah.
all like real funky and you're just kind of like, what is this? And you're like, I don't know if I would ever want to drink more than like a couple glasses of this, but it's interesting while you're doing it.
So I've heard of orange wine, but I don't think I have had it before. So maybe I forget if we had talked about it when we had our call before this, like a few weeks ago. I know I heard about it recently, but I haven't had it before.
Yeah, like there's like Italy does it. Like I think Austria's got some orange wine in their country too. So you can find it. I mean, it's people carry it in the States here. But yeah, it's pretty unique. It's pretty like it's hard to even describe. It's almost like in a way, the one that I had, I remember was like if you were drinking like flat orange soda, like it had that kind of profile. Like there was no
Okay.
fizz or anything to it. And I was like, this is really weird, but like I'm still enjoying it at the same time. It's kind of
Huh.
so that's been pretty interesting to try some stuff from there.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go hit up my wine shop around here and see if I can find that because that sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the key is to always have a good wine shop somewhere nearby, like a nice independent. Like they just carry some stuff that you can't find at your big grocery store, stuff like that's always nice to have.
Right. Yeah. We don't have a lot of smaller independent wine shops, but do you guys have Total Wine and More over there?
We don't in Ohio. Well, I think the Ohio laws have basically like not outlawed them, but made it really difficult for them to be here. So
Mm.
you can find them in Kentucky, Tennessee too, as well. But yeah, no, we have like really no big box wine stores. Like we have this grocery store called Jungle Gyms, which is down in the Cincinnati area. So it's like an hour away, and they have like a giant, like it's a giant grocery store. Like it's bigger than a Costco. It's bigger than like they have just all this like foreign cuisine and food and stuff, and like they have live fish tanks in there and all this stuff. Like if you can't find it there, it's kind of like you might not be able to find it anywhere. And they have a giant wine section. They got high end stuff, just a bunch of stuff from California too as well. Big beer section too as well. So like you can find some decent stuff there like that gets carried kind of everywhere, but yeah, we don't have any big box places, Total Wines or anything like that anymore. I don't know if we ever did or and they just left or what, but it doesn't
Hmm.
sound like the way the laws are structured, the state laws, that they're really able to do much here, if anything.
Got it. I always forget how each state is so different with the laws. Like, because I'm from California, LA, so if you go to Utah, like they're obviously much more strict and like a lot of more regulations, and I just always forget that that's a thing. Like here, it's not really an issue.
Yeah, and then like Ohio started cracking down on being able to ship wine here. So now like if you buy wine from a wine group or even like wine.com, which has kind of fallen off, I
Hmm.
think the last year with what they carry, like some of it they won't ship to you, but if you go if you change your address for a different state, like it'll say like, oh, we'll ship it there. So some of it's restricted too as well, which kind of, so when you're if you're shopping online and you're in Ohio trying to get it delivered, like you kind of have to go to the shipping part first if you've never used the place before to see will they actually send it to me before like you go through the whole order process, and then like
Right.
2 days later like, hey, we can't send it to you because you're in Ohio or something like that. So yeah, that was a whole thing because they were mad during like the pandemic and everything that people were ordering wine and liquor and having it mailed to them from out of state, and they weren't visiting the local liquor stores and state owned liquor stores and stuff like that. So there was a way to like try and keep alcohol money like within the state borders and stuff. So yeah, the only people that pay for it is the consumers who are looking for something that we don't carry here.
Right.
So yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I guess we'll transition from wine to what we wanted to talk about today. Some of the topics we touched on before was on death, and then someone's more like millennial compared to me. I'm like at the cusp of Gen Z millennial. Like I'm in my mid 20s, and you're in your 30s, and just kind of the growing and different stuff that you've experienced or kind of come to realization. So, yeah, just kind of take it away. I'm excited to learn from you as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, I'm 35, have a 16-month-old first kid, married, have a condo that we bought last year out of really kind of being forced into the situation. Apartment fell through right after the birth of our son. They were supposed to renovate it. They didn't. Wound up kind of figuring it out on the fly. And we really enjoy the place that we live now. It's like a couple streets over from the place that we were supposed to rent. But you go through like all this stuff, and I mean people say like having a kid changes your perspective on stuff, and it does to an extent. There are just certain things that you never really considered before that you do now, whether it's stuff going on in the long term or how things, you have set up, whether it's, financially, whatever. Um, but yeah, then you kind of like also have a bunch of time to reflect on where your life was because it's such a drastic change. Like you can't just like go and do something anymore because now you're responsible for another human being. So it's like, okay, we want to go do this thing. How do we do that? Like, all right, well, his nap schedule is this, or he needs to eat here. So you have to figure out like where this window is just to even to like go to the grocery store. And like when they're
Hmm.
first born, you're like, oh, I have like a 2 hour window to like do grocery shopping. Like, so as soon as this happens, then you got to just go. So you're constantly like trying to prepare yourself for the next thing when you get like that next block of time. But also within all that, you have some sleepless nights and whatnot, and then you just wind up like you can't have a TV on or anything like that, so you're just kind of thinking about stuff at like 3 a.m. while you're trying to get a baby back to sleep, and you just go through like how different your life is now versus even just a couple years ago, but drastically different than like in your 20s. Like in your 20s, it's you're going once you get into college, it's like you're trying to figure out like what career path you want to go down. You're going out to bars, you're staying out till like 2 a.m. And then eventually, like I can't imagine staying out till 2 a.m. at a bar now. Like that seems like the least appetizing thing that I would want to do, even if I had like multiple days kid free. Nowhere on that list of things I want to do is going to be go to a bar and be out till like 2:30 in the morning. It just isn't.
Yeah.
And it all just kind of shifts when you think about like how much just different things you were doing just 10 years ago versus like where you're at now.
Right. So I'm 26, so I'm in my mid 20s, and I've now have peers starting to have babies, and all that, and just like this shift where they have shared, where like you said, it's not just about you anymore. You have to account for this other little human being that you're completely responsible for. Um, So let's kind of dive in, like you said, like you're up all night and you're like thinking and you have lots of thoughts, maybe I'm sure lots of like aha epiphany moments. What have been some of the ones that stuck with you the most that have just brought you a lot of insight?
I think one is you as time goes on, like your circle gets smaller and smaller. If you think about like how many people you interacted with, and then as the years go on, like 20, 21, like you had this big group of, friends, people you'd see out, whatever. And then like you get to kind of your age area and it gets a little bit smaller, it's a little bit tighter, you still might run into some people or see some people that you don't see as frequently. And then once you get into like your kind of 30s, mid 30s, like it really shrinks down. Like I just went to a wedding last weekend and I saw people that I hadn't seen. And I mean, I went to high school with them, college. I hadn't seen them in probably like 10 years. And part of that is I don't really get back to that area that much. They don't get anywhere near my area very often either. And it just kind of life goes on and you're on the, this different path or whatever. And then you see these people and you kind of look at everything through the lens of like, wow, if I would have stayed in that town or if I would have stayed in that city, like, would I, would that have been the life that I wanted versus where I'm at now versus where I want to be kind of thing too, as well. And you kind of run it all through this framework. And it's just, you just have this insight and you're like, wow, I'm really glad this happened, or I wish I would have done this. And then you can kind of strategize if there's stuff in there that you do want to still do and accomplish. Like you can kind of start to focus on that. But it's just really interesting when you get to think, just take some time and actually think like no music, no podcast, no TV on or whatever. And you're just thinking and just letting your mind kind of wander as to like where it goes and all the stuff that you realize either you still want to do or you didn't do or you're glad you didn't do or vice versa. And yeah, it's just like a good reflection period. I've never been somebody who's interested in like those silent like retreats, like those things exist
Mm.
that like it's basically like you go somewhere and then they all vary I guess by different degrees. And met someone once that like went to one for I think like 5 days or a week, but it's just like, you take away all these distractions and everybody's just kind of silent, and it just allows you to kind of like take a break and reprocess almost. And I think for a lot of people, that's what COVID was.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, people lost their jobs and stuff, but they also had the first time to think like, do I really like my job? Like, do I really want to continue to do this? Like, working in this industry, whether it's restaurants or insurance or whatever, and you get laid off and you're just kind of like, well, if I got laid off now, like what's stopping them from laying me off when, you know, anything else happens down the road? And do I really, like, how did I get here? Do I really like my job? Is this something I want to continue doing? And I think a lot of people got, the first time to actually have that kind of inner dialogue and reflection. And then you saw a bunch of people like shift careers and things. And it seems to be, kind of for the better. Certain industries are still hurting for people, restaurant industry being one. And I only say that because it's something that I'm involved in with the podcast that I do. But so it's a topic we kind of cover pretty frequently, but there's other industries too. And now there's like the whole return to office thing. And you don't realize how much time you spend when you're working in an office, not doing anything else. And I was thinking about it the other day, I was like, I don't know how like my mom, when I was a kid, would work like 8 to 5, 9 to 5, and she'd come home and she'd make dinner. And you're just like, that, like, you just never did anything else. Like, I mean, like this core chunk of your day is just already planned out. Like you're working and then you have to do this thing when you get home. And then there's like this other thing. And it's just like, yeah, that's not the way it is now. And I'm really thankful for it, remote work and remote opportunities and all that stuff. But it's just mind blowing to think how different things were from like when I was a kid, or probably even when you were a kid,
Mm-hmm.
versus they are now in just that sense of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're saying right now is so relatable to me, because I was working a corporate job, and within the past month I did get laid off because of budget cuts. And so I'm having that dialogue of, what do I want to do? Was I really even happy with that job? Towards the end, I really was starting to not be that fulfilled, and it's left me a lot of time to just really sit with my thoughts of like, okay, where do I want to prioritize my time and energy now? And thinking back to, growing up where my dad was gone all day working and then couldn't take care of anything else, but we'd come home, pick us up from school, prepare dinner, help us with homework, just repeat the cycle. And now he has a hybrid situation since COVID. He only goes in the office 3 days a week. And the other two, he's here at home working. And like you said, I think back to, man, him as a single dad. Like, how was he doing everything? You have your chunk day dedicated, and then you can't do anything else. And I reflect to what my schedule was. My 8 to 5 all day. I can't take care of anything else. Like, I can't work on the podcast. I just started going back to school this past month too. So I'm thinking the timing worked out well for me, because now I have all the time to focus on this class and the podcast and try to figure out what direction I want to go now that I'm going into grad school. But it just to be, whether it's laid off or you have a sharp turn career change, like all the thoughts and dialogue that starts happening are like, what the hell is next? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, like I mean, I got laid off as well earlier this year from the place that I was working and at the time. And once you get past that, like people might call it like fear of the unknown or whatever. Once you get past that, the financial aspect of,
Yeah.
once you get through, you sign up for unemployment, all that stuff or whatever, you're doing the job search, it's going to take a little bit. But once you kind of figure out all that stuff, and then you can, like, it just felt like I could breathe for the first time. Like, and I didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
high stress job. I mean, the place that I was working was great. People were nice. Like everything was pretty laid back. It was just literally the business went south on them. And it was just like, yeah, first department to go is going to be this department. And that's the department I was in. So, it was just really just a downturn in business versus some of the other companies were laying people off because they didn't want to come back to work in the office and all that stuff. And they won't outright admit it, but that's kind of, we all know that's what's going on.
Right.
But yeah, just, it was kind of nice. Like you just had this break. And yeah, if it was just like the first time where I just had like multiple weeks off in a row, didn't have to worry about going back to work. Like you still had worry about like, yeah, am I going to find another job? Like how's this going to take? Financial stuff, all that. But once you get past that or you're done thinking about that, I was like, oh man, you could go get lunch today. Like, and it's just like something small like that. You go and do it, and you just realize like how happy you are just going to get lunch, and you're not worrying about like, oh, I got to get back to the office, or oh, I got to get back online or whatever. And you can just be like, yeah, I'm gonna take my time, and this is great. And there's like just no stress, like, and you're just like, wow, wish it could always be like this. Like, it's just great.
I've been taking full advantage of I have a more open schedule. Granted, I'm still busy, but I'm busy in the way I want to spend it. Like going to the gym has been a big part of my routine this year, but towards the end of me working, I was kind of taking a step back on my priority list because, doing the podcast, working full time, getting ready for school. And now I'm like, I can work out in the morning and then come home, record an episode midday, edit, do my assignments, make dinner. I'm not rushing, trying to figure out, exhausted. It's, and like you said, with the being able to breathe, that has been me where I've realized like, wow, I have a chance to kind of relax a little bit and reassess. And I talked to my mentor about a week ago, explaining her my situation, what's been going on. And she brought up a really good point where she's also in her 30s, saying like the 20s is a good time to have this gap of what's next because that's the time where you get to explore and all that. For you in your 30s, is there anything that maybe you would have wanted to tell your younger self going into your 30s, or maybe any other 20-year-olds, people like my age listening? Is there any like insights as in your 30s that you would share with maybe like a Gen Z or the baby millennial?
Yeah, like it's, I mean, it's really cliche, but it's, I do wish that I would have pushed myself into a career or job field that I enjoyed more than the business HR stuff that I'm
Mm-hmm.
involved with. Like, and I mean, my age bracket, like, we really got screwed. We graduated college at the worst possible time. Like, I graduated 2010. Like, it took me, after I graduated, I mean, it took me 6 months just to get like a job,
Yeah.
like applying every day. And this is 2010, the whole recession, the economy is terrible. There's talk about banks going under, auto manufacturers going under, all that stuff. And it took forever just to get a job out of college, like with a bachelor's degree, a good GPA, all that stuff. And then I wound up falling into, this HR field that I'm in and have been really ever since. And like, it pays the bills. I'm good at it, but do I enjoy it? Like, no. Am I
Mm-hmm.
passionate about it? Like, no. So I really wish that I would have you know, been able to, or had more of an opportunity to go into a field that I really enjoyed. Problem is, you have to make that decision when you're going to college within like your first year, and you don't know what you want to do. And college advisor didn't help. They told me actually to get a general business degree because it would apply to more things. And that turns out that that was not the right idea at the time. You actually needed to be really specific in what you were doing,
Mm.
whether it was accounting or whatever.
What was your degree in specifically?
It's like business management
Oh,
and
okay.
administration. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
is just generic.
Yeah.
And, that was kind of some bad advice I got, but that was also a roundabout way I wound up getting in that because I was going for accounting and going to transfer to a different school after I did kind of your basic level classes at a community college. And when I went through the transfer process, like, they had already allowed everybody to book the classes. Like, they didn't hold any open for any of us transferring in. So I would have had half a year with like just like two classes that would have gone towards my degree. So I would have had to go on probably another year extra to complete like an accounting degree. And I was like, no, like, I'm not doing 5 years for
Yeah.
this. So I wound up switching to that, and it worked out. At the time, I was able to still work, go to school, all that stuff, and kind of pay the way through it. But yeah, I do wish that I would have got into something that I just enjoyed more than where I'm at now. I mean, now it's, but now I'm kind of in the same boat where I'm looking at like, all right, let's timeline this out. Like, how many more years do you want to do this? What else do you want to do? Start figuring that out now and lining things up so you can get there in the next 2, 3, 4 years doing something that you enjoy, or at least enjoy more than what you're doing now. So that's kind of a big thing. Like when you have this opportunity, whether you get laid off or whatever, to reassess your situation, really like actually take some time, set some time aside to reassess and figure out what you want to actually do, or what you might, even if it's just trying something else because you don't like what you're doing now,
Hmm.
and just give that a shot. And just kind of figure out how long it's going to take you to get there, and then just start creating kind of little benchmarks, little check check marks, whatever. Hey, but 6 months, like I need to have this, or I need to have this set aside, or I should be enrolled in classes for this or training program or whatever, and just timeline it out that way you kind of stay on this path of not overwhelming yourself like, oh man, I got to go back and get like a 2 year degree in order to switch to that field. It's like, okay, but like start signing up for, let me go find a college first. And then, all right, I can do everything online. How much money do I need to do this? How many classes can I reasonably handle while still working so I can pivot to this? And then, kind of going through it that way. All right, I need to take 3 classes every semester, and then I'll have this done in 2 years. Okay, so let's do that. Let's sign up for all this stuff. And then you just kind of, and once you don't overwhelm yourself, I think it's easier to kind of make that pivot. But yeah, I would say that would be my advice. It's just try and figure out as soon as you can what you actually enjoy doing, and if it's possible to have a career in there, and if it is, go for it. Worst
Right.
case scenario, it doesn't work out and you wind up kind of back to where you already are now in like a stable position or whatever, just something that you're not passionate about. But at least you tried. Everybody would tell you, oh, don't do that, why are you doing that, why are you switching fields or whatever. But life is really short, and it's too short to just stick in a career field or whatever position that you just don't really enjoy.
I have some friends that, they're in really good fields, good careers, they're making pretty damn good money, but then I have conversations with them and they share how they hate it and they're miserable. And it goes back to the conversations where they're in dialogue, like, is the check really worth my quality of life, like my mental health? Like, does it equate? Is it worth it? Obviously, some people aren't fortunate enough where they can just take time off just to figure themselves out. But kind of want to share my experience. I graduated 2020, so right at the pandemic, horrible time as well. I got my bachelor's in film production, which is probably one of the least stable things you can do. But I was so gun ho, like this is exactly what I want to do, nothing else. But then obviously, pandemic happens. There's no jobs available for the film industry or anything. And I had a long time. It took me, I want to say, a year, a whole year of applying all the time, trying to look for anything just to get a job, which was ended up being the winery. And I that time was really hard for me mentally because you have the expectation of, okay, right after you graduate college, you start your career, and especially when you're in your younger 20s, I think there's a lot of pressure. You need to have all your shit figured out. And you realize, okay, you might not have it figured out for another 10 years, maybe, if that. um, and so that's one of the things where I'm actually thankful for the pandemic for me is it gave me a lot of time to really assess what I wanted to do. And that's how this podcast came about. I had time to, one, go to therapy, figure out mental health stuff, do this as a project just for fun, and then now it's transitioned me to wanting to get my master's in psychology. So it's interesting how times where it seems very, what's the word, bleak, like just very shitty for lack of a better word, but then if you just try your best to, like you said, breathe, once you get aside from the financial stress and all the logistics, you just have a moment to really assess and check in with yourself what opportunities can come out of it.
Yeah, it's crazy to think like in our lifetimes there's been two there's been like two major points within like a 12-year span where like the world just kind of stopped. Like when I graduated college and when you graduated college. And it makes you think like, well, what's going to happen in like at the end of this decade, like when we get to 2030, like what's waiting there? Because like, is this the new thing where it's like every 10 years, like there's some major thing that just makes the world stop, like
Right.
for whatever reason? You try not to think about it too much because there's nothing you can do about it.
Hmm.
But it just makes you kind of wonder, like, man, like is this what we all have like 6 years to figure out, embrace ourselves for like the next big thing that like makes everything just stop for a year? Is that what we're doing now? So yeah, it's hard, and you just have to take like baby steps. I mean, it's that's all you can do. I mean, you can overwhelm yourself, you can overthink everything. That was always a big thing for me, was always I never had a lot of people that were like, oh yeah, go do this or go try this. It was always like, well, what if that doesn't work out? I was like, well,
Mm.
if it doesn't work out, like it takes a long time to kind of shift that mentality. And it's still something I'm working on, where it's like, yeah, if it doesn't work out, like I'm in the same position I already am.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just like 6 months later or something like that. Because there's a million people that'll tell you a reason not to do something, whether it's based off their own experiences, they're unhappy with their situation, their job, or things that they're passionate about that they can't do, what have you. And they'll be like, you can't do that, or you're not good enough to do that, or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but what if I am? Like, it's kind of weird and cliche, and all that warm and fuzzy stuff, believe in yourself and all that stuff, but there is some truth in there. I think it gets overplayed and in certain settings, but yeah, if there's something that you want to do, just go do it. Like, there's always going to be, you can work at a bar, you can work at a restaurant, like they always need people. You can sell insurance, you can always there's always some job that you can wind up in. It might not be a great job, but you can fall back into something that'll at least pay you bills until the next thing that you figure out that you want to try or whatever. But going through life and spending 30 years at a company is not really an option anymore. And also, like, it doesn't sound like a great option either.
Hmm.
Like, there's a reason why most companies don't have pensions anymore. They don't expect anybody to be there that long to
Yeah.
qualify for one. Like, that's why, you talk to anybody, probably your generation, your age range, maybe a little bit younger, like, and talk to them about a pension. They're like, what? Even I barely understand pensions. They just don't exist.
Right. I it goes over my head.
So like it's not a selling point of like, hey, you should continue to do this thing that you don't really like, because 20 years from now, like you might have this little bit of chunk of money that might let you retire for 10 to 15 years to actually enjoy your life before like some health problems start kicking in. Like, that's the other thing you start realizing too, is when you get into your 30s. And I heard this the other day, and you don't really think about it too much, but people always talk about like, oh, midlife crisis, blah, 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 blah. Like the average age for like a male in the US is like low 70s. It's like 72, 73. Like women, it's higher. It's like 77, 78, 76, somewhere in there. I was like, well, I'm 35. So like if we're just averaging this out, like I'm kind of at the halfway mark. Like the halfway mark isn't 50.
Yeah.
Like everybody associates, like
Right.
everybody thinks like you're gonna live to, 100 or whatever. But like, it's just the other day, I grew up on the East Coast, and pitcher from the Red Sox, fan of, baseball growing up and everything. And, he died. He's 57. He died of brain cancer. And like, he played like 20 some years, and like, or close to 20 years as a professional athlete. And then, he was only out of the sport for like 12, 13 years since he like retired. And then he winds up passing away because of brain cancer. And it's like, at least he got to do something like he really enjoyed for a good chunk of his life. But yeah, just because you're an athlete and you have money or whatever, like doesn't mean you can't get some random cancer or disease or something. And like he's 57, like he's like 15, almost 20 years short of like the average life expectancy for
Yeah.
somebody in the US. And he had accessibility to better doctors than most of us average people do. And stuff like that, and like team doctors and screening, and it didn't matter. He got rare form of brain cancer, and like that was it. So you kind of start thinking about that stuff, and you're like, you spend so much time of your life in school, and you know, somewhere around I think like 18 total years. You know, you start kindergarten at 5, you graduate at 21, something like that. So
Around. Yeah.
yeah, 17 years somewhere in there. And it's just, yeah, it's a big chunk of your life is spent in school. And it's kind of like, for what? Like, there's so many people I talk to on my podcast, and they're like, yeah, I was going to be a lawyer. And I decided I didn't want to do it. Like, did law school, I was getting ready to, or go to law school. And they're like, I didn't really want to do it. Now they're like chefs that run restaurants, and they're generally more happier. They're not like as wealthy as they would have been if they remained a lawyer or anything like that. But there really hasn't been anybody that I've talked to that's like, I regret that decision. Like, even with the chaos that the restaurant industry is and profit margins being so slim and all this stuff, I have not yet in any of my conversations with anyone encountered anybody who's like, man, I really wish I would have stayed on that lawyer path or that doctor path instead of getting into restaurants and dealing with all the stuff that comes with that. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe eventually it will, but uh, so they all seem genuinely happier despite the situations that they find themselves in, which are high stress and all the problems within that industry. But yeah, so I guess moral of the story is just there's not a whole lot of time, and to spend a bunch of it doing stuff that you don't enjoy doing just seems kind of silly.
Right. So yeah, the life's so short. It goes by so fast. I mean, like we're already in October. I just remember it being New Year's. Like, where did this year go? And I totally agree with you. Just to be a slave to a job because it brings the bills, so you can earn money to live a life that you can't even enjoy. To me, it doesn't make sense. Obviously, again, people have different circumstances, and sometimes they have to do that because they have other people they need to take care of. But let's say, hypothetically, it's just you only can take care of you. You're only responsible for yourself, and you have the luxury of exploring. Again, like I'll have conversations with peers and they hate their job, but like, oh, well, this is what I got my degree in, so they feel like they're stuck. But then you look at stats, it's like what, 80% of people don't end up doing what their degree is in any way. It's like some crazy high number. Yeah, like I thought I would have for sure been that 20%, like film, like whole production companies being on set, and I'm like completely a whole different direction. But looking at where the direction's heading is taking me, I already feel so much more fulfilled. Like, why would I be a slave to this production company working ridiculous hours on set for what? It's just having that perspective, and this conversation is also very relatable to myself and some of my close friends. Some of us have been laid off, some of us can't find jobs right now. We're struggling. There's a lot of pressure of like, oh, you're in mid-20s, you need to have everything figured out. But you hear 30-year-olds, you even hear 40-year-olds where they've had a like a restart or start a whole new chapter, and they're figuring it out, and it makes it feel less daunting, or for lack of a better word, I guess, just stressful. Realize like, okay, like it's a lot, just our circumstance, like economically, the way things are, society, it's a lot bigger than just like you as yourself as like the problem of everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there are examples that you can, point to them. The two that come to the top of my head is, Anthony Bourdain, who, everybody knows from his TV show, if you know who he is, but he didn't start being on TV and doing any of that stuff until he was in his mid 40s. Like, he was working as a chef in a restaurant in New York until I think he was like 44. And, he's like, I didn't have a retirement plan. Like, I wasn't going to have any, like, I was going to do this until like I couldn't stand in the kitchen anymore. And then I don't know what I would have done after that. And the other one is John Hamm, who like he was a struggling actor in Hollywood, and he gave himself till like his some age in his 30s. He was like, I don't remember if it was like 31 or what, but he was just like, well, if I don't land like something consistent, like more than like, just going to auditions and winding up as like a background character and something by the time I'm, 33 or 35, he's like, then I'm just going to leave. And like, I gave it a shot. It didn't work out. And he wound up, getting this lead role in, one of these kind of all time great TV series, but it can just take that one thing. So it's just, you have to set your own boundaries, but like it's also never too late. There's people that have made these giant career changes in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and like that's what everybody knows them as. And it's like they spent numbers of years before that doing nothing relating to that. So it can be done. I don't think society does a great job of highlighting that, probably for a bunch of different reasons. Um, but yeah, it's something to continue to strive to, and not to just kind of throw the towel in and be like, well, like I get it. I mean, I get, you have a stable career and it pays the bills, but that doesn't mean you can't start something on the side. It doesn't mean you can't
Hmm.
work towards something else and figure out, what financial situation you need to be in before you can make that full switch.
Yeah.
I mean, there's examples of people that, come out of having all these successes, and something happens and they lose everything and they find their way back. I mean, too, as well. It's kind of like the whole, most of the stand-up comedians or whatever, like they're just kind of broke and waiting for that big break kind of thing. And I think that, unfortunately, as most of us, it just gets applied to these specialty fields, these actors, these comedians or whatever. But I think it mostly applies to anybody who's just, you're working in a factory or whatever, like you're kind of just waiting for that big break, but nobody's going to discover you in a factory, but you kind of have to go out and you kind of figure out what you want to do and push towards that.
Hmm. Totally agree. Since you're in your mid 30s, is there anything that you're now being intentional about as you're gonna be heading towards your second half of your 30s, as a new father and all that? Is there anything now that you've learned from 30 to 35 that you are like, okay, I'm gonna be much more intentional or much more applicable or something along those lines in regards to where you see like maybe the next 5 years for your life?
I would say probably just where you spend your time.
Mm.
And it changes so much, really when you're in your 30s. Maybe it doesn't change that too much to your 20s, but definitely when you have a kid, it changes with just how much free time you have and the things that you can do within that window, like I was talking about earlier. Like that's a big thing. And you kind of narrow down, I was always like for the longest period of time, I would always make like I still do it a little bit, like make lists of things that like I want to do. And there's kind of a thing like, daily accomplishments, like things you wanted to do or whatever. And you realize how little time you have to like do on those things. So it in a way it's made me more efficient when I have a window of time to do something that I do want to do. I really try and push myself to do it, and kind of squeeze that in if possible without overwhelming or missing out on any other responsibilities or anything like that. But you just kind of really frame a lot of stuff into like, is this worth doing? Like, is this worth my time? Like, if I have an hour of free time, like, is this TV show worth watching?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that how I want to spend my hour? Like, I used to like love watching sports, as most kind of boys do and everything. And yeah, you just reach this point eventually where it's like I don't want to sit on the couch all Sunday and watch football. Like that just seems, and some people, that's what they want to do, and more power to them. If that's what you enjoy, like great. For me, it's just not how I want to spend my time. Like I used to play golf. I don't play golf anymore because I don't want to spend 4 or 5 hours of my Saturday morning on a golf course, like, trying to, shoot 15 over par or something like that on it's just it's what if you really enjoy golf and that's your thing, it gets you out of the house or whatever, like that's great. But for me personally, it just wasn't worth the time investment. And you start weighing and looking at everything through this lens of like time. Not so much like how much time you have left in your life or anything like that, but just in this amount of time that I have right now, what is the most enjoyable thing I could be doing? Like the thing I want to do the most. And that's kind of how you start, at least how I have started shifting like my mindset to just focus on stuff that like I want to do and I want to participate in versus, some obligatory thing or like watching, a football game. And it's like, well, what's the point? Like they're terrible. They're going to lose or whatever. So yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest shift or probably my mindset over the past year or two is just not necessarily being more efficient with my time, but really dedicating the time that I'm applying to something to making sure that it's something I really, really enjoy and really, really want to do.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. That's been something on my mind recently. So like in a way that was what I needed to hear. So thank you. Is there any other topics or any other points you wanted to touch on and share?
I would say like, you know, going into even just touching on like mental health, like nobody's normal. Like we're all messed up. Like we all are. Like
Yeah.
even if your parents want to say that they don't like believe in mental health or whatever, like we're all messed up in some way. Like whether it's you don't handle stress very well or you're depressed or you have anxiety or whatever, like everybody you see walking down the street has something. There is no like perfect person.
Hmm.
So, and I think a lot of the stigma is like gone away from that and people are like addressing, but yeah, really, I just think like really the way I kind of addressed mine was really just taking a break and like thinking about things and like, okay. And it's just trying to find the enjoyment out of stuff because life can be very overwhelming a lot of the time and just different stuff coming at you. And, you know, whether, if you have a job that you don't really like that stuff will be there tomorrow. Like there's very few things in life that are really urgent. Like they can mark the email with the red exclamation point, but it's probably not that urgent. Like it can wait like 8 hours till the morning. Like that's the thing that always gets me now is just when anybody's like, oh, this is urgent or oh, we got to do this right away. And I'm like, yeah, but do you? Like, do
Hmm.
you really like, is this an emergency? Like it's not. It's an emergency in this weird framework of this place, but like for you personally, like, is this an emergency? Like, is this life or death? No, it's not. Like, it
Yeah.
just isn't. It can wait. Like, don't sacrifice that hour you were going to spend doing something you really enjoy so you could respond to that email and you know have this person fill out this form of paperwork even though they won't get hired till 3 weeks from now or whatever, or their insurance premium won't start until, a month from now. It's like so many things in life are not urgent. Like almost all of them are not actually urgent. So don't sacrifice your time for doing something you really, really enjoy that brings you like genuine happiness to check something else off a list for something that like you could care less about.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Well, I think we touched on a lot of nice topics. Thank you for your perspective. As you're talking, there's a lot of things I'm like, those have been things that have been on my mind, and so a lot of this has kind of hit home for me. So thank you for that. Um, I do want to offer you time to plug in your podcast or any other stuff that you want to share where people can check you out, follow, subscribe, anything that you want to share.
Sure. Yeah. Name of the podcast is called Spoon Mob. We're in like 130 some episodes now. Been doing it for like 3 years. So I interview people in the hospitality industry. So chefs, restaurant owners, sommeliers, and some people, cheesemongers, fish purveyors, stuff like that. People that are just kind of doing interesting things, cool things. Usually, kind of anywhere from an hour to 2 hour kind of interview. We kind of do extensive amount of research on their career and talk about it, kind of how they wound up where they are. And yeah, it's been super enjoyable to be doing. So if you're into wine or food or restaurants or whatever, check it out. You can find us on Instagram, any podcast app too as well. It's at Spoon Mob on Instagram. Pretty much all the other social medias are the same, but website spoonmob.com. And yeah, just search on any podcast app and you can find us. It's a white kind of spoon microphone logo with the orange background. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing. We're coming up on the end of year 3. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff in there. Really happy I found the medium and got into it. And I think, the podcast medium, it's a difficult space to be in, and part of that's just because of how many like low level celebrities are in there now because they just need to get a check kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where it was something else before. But yeah, it's just been a lot of fun to be in that space.
It's been cool to connect with a lot of different podcasters through the podcast and, collaborating and just learning from everybody. So, again, thank you for reaching out and wanting to share your time with me, share a glass, and, share your insight. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, really enjoy the podcast. It's always cool to connect with people that are passionate about doing podcasts and are touching on different topics and have something kind of unique and a unique perspective too as well. So yeah, keep it going as long as you can. And as long as you want to too as well is kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a set ending point and it can run on forever. It can run on for 5 more episodes. It can run on for 50. Like it's kind of whatever you want it to be. And it's always cool to just support people in the space that are super passionate about it. And I always enjoy just doing guest spots just because it's another way to be on a podcast and have a conversation, but it's, not necessarily in the format that I do. So it's always cool to contribute and help support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you bring up a really good point of however long you want to do it. That was kind of one of the things that led me away from film was, I had produced this massive project and the day of the premiere, people already were asking me, like, when's the next one? And it wasn't like any moment like, oh, God, like I spent a whole year on this. I can't relax, And so I've had that kind of inner dialogue with this podcast. I see myself doing it for the foreseeable future, but there's moments, as grad school is going to start, whenever I start working full time, how do I balance my life with all my work and projects? So trying to figure that out. So I like that you brought it up because it is important to know, like, as long as however you want to do it, you don't let other people's opinions tell you what you should and shouldn't do. Because then the day it's not their life. So doesn't matter.
No, yeah, I don't know how long I'll do it. It'll just, I think, be until I no longer find it fun.
Yeah. Well, guys, first off, cheers. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate your time. And yeah, guys, I'm going to have all his links, his Instagram, everything in the show notes bio. That way you can go check him out, follow him. All the foodies and winos out there, definitely check it out. Because that sounds super interesting. And yeah, I hope you guys have a beautiful day, beautiful rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in, share with friends, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, bye guys.